I've always loved my neighborhood. It's one of those quiet places where people respect each other's space, where the biggest drama is usually whose dog left a surprise on someone's lawn. My house sits on a corner lot, giving me a driveway that isn't just a slab of concrete. It's essential for my daily life. I use it for my car, my partner's car, and most importantly, for my elderly mother, who visits frequently. She's not as mobile as she used to be, and making her walk on the street to my front door over uneven sidewalks is out of the question. The driveway is hers when she needs it. I pay for it. I maintain it. It's mine. And yet, someone else decided it wasn't. Enter Karen. Karen wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was the embodiment of entitlement, walking around like she owned not just her house, but the air around it. Mid-40s, yoga pants that had clearly never seen a yoga mat, and that condescending smirk that made you feel like you were a problem. If you're imagining her holding an oversized iced coffee and looking down at the world, you're already on the right track. And Karen, for some reason, had decided my driveway was public property. The first time it happened, I thought it was a mistake. I pulled into my street after a long day at work, already dreaming about kicking off my shoes and settling in with a drink. But instead of rolling smoothly into my driveway, I hit the brakes hard. There it was, a shiny white SUV parked neatly in my spot. I stared at it for a moment, my brain refusing to process what I was seeing. Did I suddenly forget my own address? Was I in some alternate universe where my driveway was a community parking lot? With a sigh, I walked across the street to Karen's house and knocked. She opened the door, phone in one hand, zero guilt on her face. Hey, Karen, right? I think you parked in my driveway by mistake. Karen blinked, then glanced past me at her car as if she had forgotten where she left it. Oh, right. Sorry about that. Her voice was syrupy sweet, like a kindergarten teacher talking to a child. I was just running in for a sec. I'll move it. She moved it. I chalked it up to an honest mistake. Problem solved. Until it happened again, and again, and again. The second time, she gave me a breezy. Oh, I was only going to be a minute, even though her car had leaves accumulating on the hood. The third time, I was done being polite. Karen, can you not park in my driveway? Oh, come on, she huffed, as if I was the unreasonable one. It's not like you're using it all the time. I stood there for a second, genuinely speechless. The audacity of this woman. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. One evening, I pulled into my street only to see her SUV parked diagonally across my driveway. Making it impossible to pull in, I marched to her door, knocked, hard, and waited. She answered with that same smug expression. Karen, seriously, move your car. She folded her arms, looking completely unbothered. You know, this isn't really your driveway. I blinked. Excuse me, it's part of the easement, she declared, flipping her sunglasses onto her head like a queen delivering a decree. Legally, it's not just your property. Anyone can use it. I let out a sharp breath. Karen, the easement is the strip of grass between the sidewalk and the street. My driveway is on my private property. She waved me off like I was a particularly annoying mosquito. Well, that's your opinion. My opinion? I stared at her, half expecting a hidden camera crew to pop out and tell me I was on some kind of prank show. But no, this woman was serious. And I knew, right then and there, that she wasn't just being careless. She genuinely believed she had the right to park in my driveway. Then came the moment that turned my frustration into outright fury. It was a Saturday morning, and my mom was visiting. She's in her late 70s, so I made sure the driveway was clear for a car. She pulled in slowly, parked, and I helped her to the front door. I stepped inside for 2 minutes to grab her some tea, and that's when I heard my mom's angry voice from outside. I ran out, heart pounding, and froze. Karen's SUV was parked directly behind my mom's car, completely blocking her in. Karen stood there, gesturing dramatically. I just needed to run a quick errand. My mom, who is usually the sweetest woman alive, was fuming. Who the heck is this woman? She demanded. I stormed over. Karen, move your car. Right now. She rolled her eyes so hard I thought they might pop out her head. You're being so dramatic. I'll only be 5 minutes. 5 minutes. I echoed, my voice dangerously calm. You just trapped an elderly woman in a car for a cupcake run? Karen scoffed. It's for my daughter's soccer team. It's important. I took a step closer, my patience snapping. Karen, move. Your car. For a second, she held her ground, arms crossed. Then she sighed loudly, as if she were the victim, and stomped her SUV. 15 minutes. That's how long it took her to move. And that was the moment I decided this war was on. Clearly, talking to Karen wasn't working. She was the type of person who only understood consequences. So I got to work. Step 1. I bought a security camera, nothing fancy, just a motion-activated one that pointed straight at my driveway. If Karen wanted to keep trespassing, I was going to catch her in 4K. Step 2. I called the local zoning office. I didn't need confirmation that my driveway was private property, but I wanted it in writing. A few emails later, I had legal proof that Karen was, in fact, full of it. Step 3. I started a Karen logbook. Every time she parked in my driveway, I took a picture and noted the time. It was becoming a full-blown case file. And then I waited, because Karen? Oh, she wasn't done yet. Karen had no idea that while she was basking in her self-importance, I had already built an airtight case against her, armed with my newly installed security camera footage, timestamp photos, and an official email from the zoning office confirming my driveway was private property. I was ready for the next inevitable showdown. I didn't have to wait long. 3 days later, I came home to find Karen's SUV, again, planted in my driveway like it belonged there. This time, she was nowhere to be found. I knocked on her door. No answer. I called her phone, because by this point, I had her number saved in a folder labeled Prohibited Karen Problems. No answer. I was done wasting my time on her. So I grabbed a piece of paper and wrote, Hi, Karen. Since you made yourself comfortable in my driveway, I figured I'd make myself comfortable blocking you in. Let me know when you're ready to have an adult conversation. Smiling face with smiling eyes. Then I parked my car directly behind hers, effectively trapping her in. 2 hours later, I was halfway through a Netflix binge when bang, bang, bang. Karen was at my door, red-faced and seething. You can't do this, she shrieked, arms flailing. I leaned casually against the doorway. Can't do what, Karen? You blocked me in. That's illegal. I let out a slow, satisfied breath. You know what else is illegal? I pulled out my phone and tapped the screen, flipping through pictures. Trespassing. Every time you park in my driveway, you're breaking the law. Karen opened her mouth, then closed it. I have proof, I continued. Photos, timestamps, and, oh look, a lovely email from the zoning office, confirming this driveway is private property. Would you like me to forward it to you? Or maybe the police? She swallowed, her smug expression wobbling for the first time. Karen, I said, crossing my arms, you're not entitled to my property. Move your car. Now. Her lips thinned into a straight line. You're a real piece of work, you know that? I smiled. Glad we agree. Now move. Grumbling under her breath, she stomped back to her SUV, threw it into reverse, and sped off, tires screeching. For a moment, I thought that was the end of it. But Karen was like a bad horror movie sequel. Unnecessary, over the top, and impossible to ignore. I knew she'd be back. And when she did, I was ready. The very next day, I walked outside to take out the trash, and boom! Karen had outdone herself. Her SUV wasn't just parked in my driveway. She had parked diagonally, taking up so much space that even if I wanted to squeeze in, I couldn't. I didn't bother knocking on her door. I didn't leave a note. I picked up my phone and dialed. Hi, I said, keeping my voice calm. I have a vehicle parked illegally on my private property. I'd like it removed. The dispatcher assured me a tow truck would be there within the hour. So I grabbed a lawn chair, made myself a coffee, and sat on my porch to enjoy the show. 30 minutes later, the tow truck rolled up. The driver, a burly guy with a no-nonsense attitude, took one look at Karen's car and got to work. Then Karen came running. She burst out her house, hair still in rollers, wearing what I could only assume were her husband's slippers. "What are you doing?" she screamed, nearly tripping over herself. The tow truck driver didn't even blink. "Ma'am, this car is parked illegally. The property owner requested it be removed." "You can't do that," she screeched. "I'll call the police." I stood up, arms crossed. "Please do. I'd love to explain to them why your car keeps trespassing on my property." Her face twisted into a mask of rage and disbelief. She turned to the driver. "Sir, please, I'll move it. Just let me get the keys." The driver shrugged. "Too late. Once we hook it up, it's going." And just like that, Karen's precious SUV was towed away. If you thought Karen learned her lesson, you don't know Karen's. A few days later, I stepped outside to find a fresh pile of garbage at the edge of my driveway. Not just a couple bags. 3 overflowing trash bags, a broken chair, and what looked like an old cat tree. Taped to one of the bags was a handwritten sign that read, "If you don't like sharing, here's all your space back." Face blowing a kiss. Oh, so that's how she wanted to play it. I pulled out my phone and took pictures. Lots of them. Then, without a word, I dragged the bags across the street right back onto her curb. Did she come outside to confront me? Nope. But I saw her peeking through the blinds, and I smiled right at her. Later that afternoon, I heard another knock at my door. I opened it to find a police officer standing there, with Karen lurking behind him, arms crossed and smirking like she had won. "Good afternoon," the officer said. "Your neighbor here claims you've been harassing her and dumping trash on her property." Karen put on her best victim face. "I just don't feel safe anymore," she whined. "Ever since I parked in his driveway, he's been so aggressive. I don't know what to do." Then she even sniffled. I smiled. "I'm so glad you're here, officer. Let me show you something." I pulled out my phone and opened my Karen Chronicles photo album. Pictures of her repeatedly parked in my driveway. The time-stamped video of her dumping trash. The official zoning email proving my driveway was private property. Karen's smug expression collapsed in record time. The officer flipped through the photos, sighed, then turned to her. "Ma'am, I see no evidence of harassment, but dumping trash on someone's property is illegal." Karen turned pale. I was just making a point." The officer's face hardened. "Would you like to press charges for trespassing and illegal dumping?" he asked me. Karen gasped. I let the silence stretch long enough for her to start panicking. Then finally I said, "I won't press charges this time, but if it happens again, I absolutely will." The officer nodded. "Ma'am, clean up your trash immediately. If you trespass again, you'll be facing a fine or worse." Karen stormed off, humiliated, while I gave her a cheerful wave. That was the last time Karen tried to park in my driveway. You'd think after getting publicly humiliated by the police, Karen would have learned her lesson. But no. Instead of admitting defeat, she doubled down. The next morning, as I was enjoying my first coffee of the day, my doorbell rang. It wasn't Karen. It was my neighbor, Lisa, who lived 2 houses down. "Hey," she said, shaking her head with an amused smirk. "You won't believe what Karen is up to now." I raised an eyebrow. "Do I even want to know?" Lisa chuckled. "She's going door to door, telling everyone you're a bully who's abusing your power as a property owner. She's trying to turn the neighborhood against you." I nearly spit out my coffee. "She's what?" Lisa nodded. "Yeah, apparently you're a control freak who hates community spirit because you won't share your driveway." She rolled her eyes. Like, who even thinks like that? I let out a slow breath, rubbing my temples. Karen was seriously trying to start a war. "She's even suggesting we should bring it up to the HOA, Lisa added. Now this made me laugh because our neighborhood didn't even have an HOA. At this point, I was getting tired of Karen's nonsense. But then Lisa said something that changed everything. "She's pulled similar stunts before," Lisa admitted. "Blocked other people's driveways, used their trash bins, even let her dog poop in people's yards. You're just the first person who's actually stood up to her." That's when I realized I wasn't alone. Karen had been making everyone's lives miserable, and now that someone had finally challenged her, she was panicking. So I did what any rational person would do. I let her dig her own grave. Over the next few days, Karen's smear campaign backfired spectacularly. Instead of turning the neighborhood against me, she exposed herself. One by one, neighbors started pushing back. The couple next door put up a "No trespassing" sign after catching Karen, letting her dog poop on their lawn. Another neighbor started locking their trash bins because Karen had been dumping her extra garbage in them. Someone even put security cameras up because they suspected she had been taking Amazon packages from porches. Karen had officially become the enemy, and she could feel it. One evening, as I was taking out the trash, I noticed something strange. A moving truck parked in front of Karen's house. At first, I thought she was just redecorating, but then I saw boxes being loaded in. Furniture, large items. My eyes widened. She was leaving. A few hours later, I watched as Karen stood in her driveway, arms crossed, scowling at the world. She looked around, as if expecting someone to come out and beg her to stay. No one did. I couldn't resist. I grabbed a piece of sidewalk chalk and wrote, in big, bold letters at the edge of my driveway, "Vacancy, no Karens allowed." By the time she saw it, she was already getting into her car. But I know she saw it, because she gave me one last death glare before speeding away for good. The first morning after Karen left felt different. There was no SUV blocking my driveway, no passive-aggressive notes, no trash mysteriously appearing in front of my house. I pulled into my driveway and just sat there for a moment, taking it all in. It was over. As I got out of my car, Lisa strolled over with a grin. "Feels good, doesn't it?" I laughed. I forgot what it was like to have a driveway I actually own. She smirked. "The whole street is celebrating." I heard Brian next door actually open a bottle of wine when he saw the moving truck. I shook my head in amusement. Good riddance. And just like that, peace returned to the neighborhood. But the best part? A few days later, a new family moved into Karen's old house. A young couple with 2 kids. And the first thing they did, they knocked on my door, introduced themselves, and said, "Hey, we just wanted to make sure we never park in your driveway by accident." I had to laugh. I guess Karen left behind a legend. Looking back, dealing with Karen was like going through a crash course in handling entitled people. Here's what I learned. Document everything. Karen tried to twist reality in her favor, but hard evidence saved me every time. Stand your ground. If you let an entitled person take 1 inch, they'll take a mile. Neighbors talk. If someone is a problem to you, chances are they're a problem to others too. Karma always wins. Karen spent years making enemies, and in the end, it cost her home. The whole ordeal made me more confident in standing up for myself. And now, whenever I see a Karen-type person pulling their usual nonsense, I just smile, because I know exactly how to handle them. I wish I could say Karen was the last entitled person I ever had to deal with. But let's be real. Where there's one Karen, there's always another. And if another one ever tries to claim my driveway, well, I've got my security cameras. I've got my zoning laws. And I've got a tow truck on speed dial. Bring it on. At its core, this story wasn't just about a driveway. It was about boundaries. Karen thought she could take advantage of people because no one had challenged her before. She mistook kindness for weakness, assuming she could manipulate, bully, and trespass without consequences. But the moment someone stood their ground, she crumbled. This experience taught me that setting and enforcing boundaries isn't being rude. It's necessary. Whether it's a driveway, personal space, or respect, you have the right to say no when someone oversteps. Because if you don't stand up for yourself, people like Karen will keep taking. And if you do, they either respect your space or leave for good